Sergers have many different presser feet for us to use for different applications. On this machine, we have several feet that we can actually consider being just the basic foot. I want to talk about them a little bit before we begin. This is the foot that is the standard foot on this machine. As we use these sergers, we find quite often we need different feet for different techniques. This foot is a clear foot, which is great. It allows you to see through the foot to see exactly what the stitches are doing and how the machine is sewing. I like the clear feet and use them a lot. This clear foot has lines in it in the foot on the toe of the foot, will show you exactly how to line up the stitches as you're sewing. This one is also a clear foot, but it doesn't have the lines in it. I actually prefer this one. The newest foot is called the open toe foot. The great thing about the open toe foot is that they've actually put red marks on all the lines that line up with the needles. If you look closely, you can see each line lines up with the needle in the machine. Our object lesson today is going to be how to deal with the leftover tails at the beginning and the end of a seam. Sergers do not backstitch, so we do not have a way to lock the stitches in. So we have to deal with tails. Now, most of the time, you don't have to worry about the tail because as you sew across the fabric, again at the bottom, as you stitch across this way, the serger will trim off that tail and it will seal that seam at the same time. But occasionally you have to know how to get that tail tucked up underneath, and that's what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to bring the tail up underneath using the machine to do it instead of using an extra accessory. Sometimes you may even have a tail that's in the center of the seam, like this one is. What caused this to happen was that I had to begin and end in the middle of a seam. I'm also going to show you the trick of how to come back in here after you've serged off and overlap the seam. So this is actually two seams that are joined together in the center. When you do this technique, you end up with this excess piece of tail and there's nothing to do with it. You don't want to just nip it off and cut it off there because it could come unraveled. Our total object at the end is to have all the tails concealed and underneath. This one is tucked inside when we began, this one is tucked inside when we ended, and this one is overlapped in the middle with the tail hidden inside. When you're finished, you should be able to open up your seam allowance and not tell where you did all of the hiding of the tails. To begin your seam, you want, of course, start in front of the presser foot, and I always like to start directly in the knife when I can. I just slide it right up like that. You want to stitch until you see that the needles have caught into the edge of the fabric. So sew up there, right there, I'm now in the fabric. You can go 2 or 3 stitches in and you're still okay. But in order to make a nice, neat beginning, lift up the presser foot, come around to the back, and smooth that tail chain out all the way up to the edge of the fabric. Don't be afraid to give it a tug. Give it a little tug like that, smooth it all out, and I like to put my needles down into the fabric, then bring the thread completely around under the presser foot and around the needles. If you look in there, you can see that the thread tail is right there. Keep your presser foot down, stitch right over the top of that tail and bring it into the knife and let the knife cut it off. Then you stitch all the way to the end of the seam. When you get to the end down here, you want to sew off just at the edge. Don't keep going, because if you keep going beyond the edge, you'll create a tail chain and you can't get rid of it. So go right off of the edge like that. Now we need to bring the fabric around by flipping it over and sliding it back underneath. You can't just turn it like this or it will hang up on the little stitching prongs underneath the machine. So you reach up here above with the presser foot up and you pull a little bit of slack in that needle thread. Then you slide the fabric off of those stitch prongs. See how it's free back there now? Then flip it over, completely over, and put it right back up underneath the needles. Bring the needles right down here at the edge of the fabric, kind of line them up, lower the presser foot, stitch down about 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, anywhere that you're comfortable, then stop. Now to get off gracefully, instead of just sewing off of the edge and ending up with these half stitches hanging off like that, stop, lift up the presser foot, turn the fabric all the way to the back, leave the foot up, and just run the machine and jump right off of the edge. And there's your finished end.